Okay, this is part three of the Byzantine Empire lecture series. This is probably the most important one. It deals mostly with the church and how the layout of the church was and the controversies relating to the church. Um, but before we even talk about that, you must understand that for the Byzantines, they took a lot of their history, a lot of their culture from the Greeks. Um, because I think the Greeks Uh, Greece and the Greeks were closer to them. The Romans took their part of their history from the Greeks themselves, and of course, Italy being so far away, that it was just easier to associate themselves with the Greeks more than the Romans. But saying that, you have a state organized school system in which you have a primary education and later education, higher education. Of course, all these schools were only open to the nobles or the elite, definitely not necessarily to the masses. Um, and of course, they again emphasized Greek literature, Greek art, law, medicine, philosophy, and so on. But where you have the big controversy or the big shakeup in the church is, of course, with two events. The first event is being the Council of Nicaea, in where they basically declare Arianism a heresy. Now, Arianism is kind of a hard concept to go to understand, but you got to understand a couple things. There's a lot of different perspectives on Christianity during this time period. That there isn't just one uniform path. There's a lot of people that believe in different things about Jesus and who Jesus was, and Arianism is just one of those. Okay, and the concept behind that is, for Arianism, is that the Son of God did not always exist, but was created by God and is therefore distinct. So the whole Trinity of God um, is somewhat problematic in that sense, because if God created, okay, the Son of God, then obviously the Son of God isn't God. He is something else. Okay, he may have um, been of godlike nature. Okay, but he was created by God. He wasn't fully within God Himself, and this is the view that Arians had, and of course, this is a problem. Okay, because for most Christians, or a good portion of the Christian community, um, they had a problem with this. And again, you have all these other views of Christianity running around, but this Arianism is probably the most dangerous to these Christian believers that believe that you have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they're all one and the same. And so at the Council of Nicaea, they outlaw it, and then they start to go through and determine what language they want to put in to identify themselves as a faith. And that's why, again, if you're Roman Catholic, okay, you okay. So, like I was saying, at the Council of Nicaea, they they banned Arianism, which of course was a big deal because obviously a lot of people believed in Arianism. Um, and so they kind of set down, like I mentioned before, kind of a path or guidelines or rules um, to on what they believed in, and that's the reason why, like I mentioned, if you're Roman Catholic, you say the Nicene Creed every single time you go to Mass. And that's why we'll go over it in class. And there's one specific word that basically is the defining word that is so important. Also, the Council of Nicaea, you must understand that the Roman Emperor, in the Byzantine Empire, the Roman Emperor was an emperor, he was a political figure, and he was a church figure. And so he kind of looked at the growth of Arianism as a threat to his political empire part as well. And so because of the church threat and the political threat, he decided to ban Arianism. And also the Council of Nicaea, you start having, what should be more established in the Bible and whatnot. So rules and procedures, belief systems was a very important deal. Okay, and then about 400 years later, you have another issue that occurs, and that's this idea of looking at pictures or idols or icons in the church and how they should be viewed. Okay, and you have what's called the iconoclasm controversy, and really what happened is that the Byzantine Empire's policy was to destroy images and icons and persecute people that venerated them. They said, they being the Byzantine Empire and the Church, and especially the Eastern Orthodox Church, that venerating these icons was a sin, was against the teachings of Jesus and the Bible, because it says in the Old Testament that you shouldn't do this. For a lot of different reasons, the Western part of the church continued to do this, and they opposed this iconoclasm, the destroying of these icons and images. And so here's where you have the beginning stages of the separation of the church between the Roman Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox Church. It's not a full split, but it's definitely the beginning of one. And I think that for the Western Church, because they were so far removed from the Byzantine Empire and the capital of Constantinople, and because they had their own issues going on with barbarian tribes, that they felt that that they needed still to have these images, because they were dealing with pagans and they were trying to convert pagans, and the use of images helped convert these people. And so where in the West, in the East, this wasn't so much the case. So you have that controversy. You also have popular piety and monasticism. Sorry, essentially people living in monasteries. You've got the early stages of Christian hermits, and literally these people, mostly men, would go out to areas in present-day Turkey where there's literally like these pillars made out of sandstone, and they would carve out caves for themselves, and up high, 20 feet or so, into these caves, and they would live there, and they would live, on very little to eat, and all they would do is pray and live a very hermit life, kind of like Buddha in that regard. And you have some famous ones. You've got one on Mount Athos. There's a monastery in northern Greece that still exists today, where they don't allow any women on this island. It's only for men. And so being a monk or being a nun in this time period is very popular. It's looked at a way of serving the community. But like I said, you have this tension between the East and the West, between Constantinople and Rome, and you also have, who is the better or the more important bishop? Is it the one in Constantinople or Rome? And at this point, rituals and doctrines start to differ, and by 1054, you have what's called the Schism of, or in 1054, where you have the big break between the East and the Western Church, and they've never been able to unify since. So this is part 3 of the Byzantine Empire. There's one more section to go after this.